What is going on? It's your boy, Mahoney, back at it again with another video. Today we're going to be ranking every single Dark Souls 2 boss there is. After how well my last video did, I basically had no choice but to make this video. So here I am. Dark Souls 2 is definitely my least favorite game out of the Dark Souls trilogy, with its bosses being pretty bad sometimes, and most of the level design sucked too, with many bugs that come with it. Anyway, the rules for this tier list are: number 1, we are ranking on how good the gameplay is, and maybe lore too. Number 2, no mini bosses, so none of the bosses being regular enemies don't count. And number 3, this is Scholar of the First Sin edition, so there's more bosses. Anyway, let's get into the game since it almost has double the amount of bosses. So let's get into the ranking. The first introduction to the horrible DLCs that this game has, the trio that is a fan least favorite of many Souls players, the Gank Squad. I can't even begin how annoying this boss is, because first of all, fighting an NPC is already terrible enough, but having to fight 3 at once as an actual boss fight always just smacks me in the face. The boss consists of 3 NPCs that have been in previous parts of the game. Varg, which is an infinite stamina Havel, and the other 2 which are NPCs from the Chasm of Old. You sort of have to strategize when to hit each person, or else you'll get harassed by Varg and great arrows being pelted at you across the map. The run back is also a hellish nightmare full of statues that shoot petrification and enemies that harass you all the damn time. The boss is so terrible that the community gave this boss its own name, which is the Gank Squad, because it's just pure gank. I don't really know why this boss is even here, because number 1, it's optional, and number 2, it doesn't even give you a boss soul. This boss is an absolute piece of shit introduction to the first DLC and will always be one of the worst bosses in the entire trilogy. At our number 40 spot, we have the Pets of the Ivory King. Alright, now normally I would put this a bit higher on the list, but this boss is too unforgiving for me to do that. It's just Ava, but there's 2 of them. So again, it's just a lazy reskin but with black fur, and an annoying healing attack that basically makes them invincible for a couple of minutes. When you enter the arena, you just fight Lud until you get it down to half health, and then Zalin joins the fight. It's pretty easy to eat Lud's health off before Zalin gets a chance to attack you. You're probably wondering why this boss is so low, and that's because of the annoying frigid outskirts. This place is quite literally the worst place in the Soulsborne series. It's a 5 to 10 minute run back that is pure hell. I don't really rank bosses on its run back, but holy crap is this place annoying as hell. To make this place even worse is the infinitely spawning reindeer. I swear to God, these reindeer and frigid outskirts. Literally no one does this place because they have to go through this frickin' hellhole. This is one of the most stressful bosses because guess what? If you die, you have to do it all over again. This boss and everything about it. On our number 39 spot is the Royal Rat Vanguard. There's not much to this boss, but just rats. Definitely the laziest design boss of the game. Scratch that, the series. Scratch the Moonlight Butterfly, or even Pinwheel from Dark Souls 1. This boss takes the cake. You enter the arena with rats pouring in, wondering why there isn't a boss. But once you kill a certain amount, a rat with a mohawk spawns in, which is the actual boss. You can easily take the rat out in 3 or 4 hits, but this boss did not have to be here at all. Now speaking of pure gank, we have the Belfry Gargoyles. Now I can't tell you how chaotic this fight is, with multiple gargoyles all on the same roof trying to shove their halberd up your butthole. When I first found this boss, I thought, oh, this boss is going to be pretty cool, since it's a remake of one of the best bosses in Dark Souls 1. But hell nah, it was just me sweating my cheeks off trying to maintain 5 gargoyles at once. This boss is just like the 4 kings, but taking too long could get 5 gargoyles all on the same roof. Every time you kill a gargoyle, another one spawns in, and goes on like this after like the 8th gargoyle. This is an absolute terrible remake of what was greatness, but made pure dookie butt. At our 37th spot, we have the goddamn Ancient Dragon. Now I know there's some Ancient Dragon lovers out there, but I just wanted to say, you're wrong. Nothing about this boss is actually fun, and it's more tedious and annoying than your average boss. The Ancient Dragon is a huge dragon that does around 3/4 of your health every single attack, with it spamming its fire breath AoE like a dickhead. He also loves camping near the edge of the arena, basically making it impossible for you to get hits in. You just have to hope it's nice enough to move towards the middle. And if you have a low upgraded weapon, good luck trying to fight it with its 19,000 health. To put this into perspective, the average health of a boss in Dark Souls 1 is 3,000 to 5,000 health. It's really boring just going back and forth, slowly chipping away at his health, with each fight lasting like 5 to 7 minutes. Definitely one of the most tedious and boring fights in the game. Alright, now on to this thing. Alright. Now I know some people don't think this boss is as bad as people think, but I think it's bad. Because it's a fat tub of lard that squirms around and rolls on you. There's really nothing special about this boss other than its comedic feature of just being a fat worm sack trying to eat you. It's crazy that this thing was once a normal guy, but showed deep affection to Mytha, the baneful queen, and got rejected. And then he expressed his desire by eating and eating and eating and eating, turning into this tub of lard. There's a gimmick where if you shoot the pots up above, he'll get distracted and start eating it. But I didn't do this because there's really no point because this boss is piss easy. At our number 35 spot, we've got the Royal Rat Authority. Now this is an annoying boss. You've got rats that give you high amounts of toxicity buildup, and an ugly rat dog that's just basically Sif, but if Artorias left her on day 1. Now normally enemies in a boss fight grind my gears, and this boss is no exception. The rats can drain your health before the dog or rat gets down. Once you kill all the rats, it's just you and that thing. It has Sif's moveset minus the sword or the flip attack. And how dare the game developers try and recreate one of the best bosses in Dark Souls 1 and make this piece of dog shit? No pun intended. This fight absolutely sucks. Now on to one of the easiest bosses in the series. It's the Prowling Magus and Congregation. Not much to talk about other than the Prowling Magus shoots dark magic and has an AoE, while the Congregation has priests that shoot lightning bolts and share a health bar with a horde of undead. You could get caught lacking if you're in the middle of the crowd, but there's benches in the back which can be used for crowd control. This boss is definitely one of the easiest, if not the easiest boss in the game, and is very underwhelming in my opinion. Alright, now on to the Dragon Rider. Dude, this man has some of the best movesets and coolest movesets in the trilogy. He swings his halberd around. Yep, that's about it. I don't really know what you were expecting, but yeah, this is mid-fight. He's really bland and I just don't like it. There isn't really a challenge to this boss or anything special about this boss. Outside the arena, you can pull a lever to raise the floor so that it's harder to fall to your death. You can do the second level to make it impossible, but real ones don't do that. Overall, a really bland boss. Well, onto the Dragon Rider, but there's two. This fight is basically everything I already said in the last one, except that there's another one wielding a bow. Once you get the first Dragon Rider low, the second one hops in with significantly lower health. It's slightly better in my opinion, since it's more of a challenge and has a cooler arena, but other than that, it's still a bland boss. Man, what a letdown. All of us are so hyped since this man is the main dude, sort of like Gwyn. He greets you along the way, encouraging you to do the true ending to seek Vendrick, and then you fight him as the last boss of the game. And like, this man's literally the title of the game, which is Scholar of the First Sin. He has some of the most passive gameplay and just boring gameplay. He starts as a burning tree thingy, shooting fireballs and doing a tree attack. And then once he's done enough, he reappears burnt out for around 5 seconds to get your hits in. I find fights that are turn-based really boring. I just don't find it fun. Aldi has a second phase where he fires up even more and has a slightly more aggressive gameplay, but it's still turn-based. Massive disappointment and really underwhelming boss. Reaching out her 30 spot is the Skeleton Lords. Now this is similar to the Congregation because you have hordes of regular enemies that all share a health bar. You enter the boss arena with 3 lords. Once you kill one, a horde of skeletons spawn in. Once you kill another one, another horde of skeletons spawn in. And once you kill the last lord, bone wheels spawn in. Now in Dark Souls 1, bone wheels were the worst pieces of in gaming. But in Dark Souls 2, they were nerfed to the ground. You don't really have anything for crowd control in this arena, but the arena is way bigger than the Magus and Congregation. I also like their thrones. They look goofy, which I like. Pretty good design-wise, but still, like most of these bosses, really underwhelming. Coming in at a number 29 spot, we have the Executioner's Chariot. Now this boss is one of the most unique bosses because it acts sort of like a puzzle. It's a gimmick boss where the chariot runs around in circles while fighting off necromancers and skeletons. The chariot goes in a loop, but you can dodge the chariot by getting to these openings right here. Once you reach all the way around the loop, you can pull a lever to drop down a gate in which the chariot crashes into it, killing the Executioner and doing a bit of damage. Then it's just a mid-fight, with the chariot doing some charge attacks and thrust attacks. You can also cheese the boss by kind of doing something like the Ceaseless Discharge cheese, but there's really no point because 1, it takes longer, and 2, this boss is pretty easy. Not a bad boss, but still very underwhelming. Alright, number 28, we have the Flexile Sentry. Now this is a pretty cool looking boss and a unique looking boss. Its 2 lizards conjoined into one being. One side holds heavy clubs and the other one holds swords. It takes place inside a pirate ship with rapidly flowing water filling the arena, which means the longer you take, the more water will flow in, making you slower. The boss is quite easy if you just stick to the club side since it has easy to dodge attacks, but be careful when the other side attacks from the front. That can catch you off guard sometimes. Not that bad in my opinion. On to the first Lord Soul boss, we have the Old Iron King, which is a giant lava demon that rests at the Iron Keep. Its name is actually Icarus Earth, which was a creation of the actual Old Iron King using Gwyn's soul, which is some pretty cool lore. You enter the arena on a small platform, taking turns swinging at each other. Like I said, I don't like bosses that are turn-based. They're really boring, and this boss is no exception. And that's basically it. He does some heavy attacks and fire-breathing attacks. You can stay by the exit fog gate to avoid the fire, but don't stay there for too long or else you'll get flung across the arena. Just don't get caught lacking falling off the arena and his heavy attacks. Other than that, he's a piece of cake. Now on to the man himself, King Vendrick. Now, similar to Aldia, what a massive letdown. This man is almost as important lore-wise as Gwyn since he was the ruler of Drangleic. Vendrick had a wife named Nishandra that was on his side, or thought at least, which ultimately led to Vendrick being manipulated by Nishandra by starting a war with the Giants as an attempt to find a cure for the curse. But this is only for Nishandra to gain power, because Nishandra was one of the spawns of Manus, who was a previous boss in Dark Souls 1. Because of this, Vendrick had to hide his belongings in the Shrine of Amana, which contained Vendrick's soul, so that Nishandra wouldn't obtain it. And then he locked himself up in the undead crypt behind his most trusted knight, Veldstad, and locked him up for eternity until he became hollow. Anyway, let's talk about the actual gameplay. Vendrick is just a tall dude with a sword and not much about him. He does attacks that for some reason do so much damage. He's easily cheesed by just strafing to the right, and then he's easy as hell. Vendrick has defenses based on how many giant souls you have. You get 3 from each memories, 1 from the Black Gulch, and the last one from the goddamn ancient dragon. Your damage is basically halved the less souls you have. Once you beat this boss, you can see a memory of him before he was hollow in the same place, which always looks sad to look at. Absolute masterpiece lore-wise, but boring as hell gameplay-wise. Now speaking of Nishandra, she's at her 25 spot. Dude, I feel bad for Vendrick because he got hella catfished. She ugly as f***. Anyway, this is the girl who did Vendrick dirty. I'm glad you can avenge Vendrick for what this old hag did to him. Anyway, Nishandra is a scythe-wielding skeleton thingy that has attacks based on dark magic, consisting of balls that spawn around her which give you curse buildup, and a giant purple beam which can probably one-shot you. She also has an AoE which can do some pretty heavy damage. But being who she is, she's really easy. You can easily manipulate her moves by just spamming her laser, which you can get many hits in. She also does some scythe swings once you get close up, but they're really easy to dodge. Oh, and by the way, how does this turn into this? Man, free my boy Vendrick, bro. Also a masterpiece in lore, sort of, but has better mechanics than other bosses. Remember me chatting about Loden Zalin? Well, this is the same boss, but less shit. There aren't 2 of them. She doesn't do that annoying healing attack, and of course there's no frigid outskirts. It's crazy how good Loden Zalin could have been if it didn't have any mechanics. Anyway, Ava basically has the same moveset as Loden Zalin. It's got the terrible hitbox swipes and the crystal magic attacks. Not really much else to talk about, but this is a massive step up from Loden Zalin. At our number 23 spot, we have the Guardian Dragon. After getting through Aldia's Keep, we enter this giant bird's nest to find this dragon. This is basically the ancient dragon, but smaller and more tolerable. It does fire attacks that can do some hefty damage, and bite attacks that are really easy to predict. The dragon is also really weak, with it being pretty easy to kill this dragon in under 2 minutes. You can take heavy damage if you get hit by its AoE, but other than that, it's easy as hell. This game really has a habit of making the weirdest bosses in the series. This boss is just a frog with a shiesty on. You get here by getting through the Shrine of Amana. Fuck this place, by the way. And then you find the Demon of Song just yodeling by itself. This is a pretty underwhelming fight. The frog can only do attacks once it opens its armor up, and you can deal damage once its armor is up. It does some swipe attacks with its hands, and a move that's just basically a Dave Blunt stage dive. It also has a grab attack that can easily kill you if you get caught in it. Again, this is also a really weak and easy boss, but it's not that bad in my opinion. Now on to the last giant. This was my first boss of the game, and honestly, this is one of the better first bosses. This is the last surviving giant of the war that Vendrick started. It's cool that you can see a stone pillar impaled through it, and his swords all over it from the war. All you really have to do is slash at its ankles and dodge its ground slams. The giant gets a second phase where it rips off his arm, which is pretty cool, as in a desperate attempt to fend you off. This boss is really good for an early game boss and has pretty cool lore too. Dark Souls never seems to learn its lessons of reskins. At number 20 we have the Giant Lord. After getting through the memory of Jay, we find the last giant before he was the last giant. It is the exact same being. I gave this boss the higher spot because this thing looks bad. Instead of its bare hands, he uses a giant sword as a weapon, which is pretty cool. He does some slams with the sword and that's it. It's cool that you get to see what this boss was doing back in the war. I've always found that pretty cool. Even though it's a reskin, it's a pretty cool boss. Now we've cracked the number 19 spot, and at this spot we have the Throne Watcher and Throne Defender. Now this fight can be pretty annoying. You have the Throne Watcher, who's way harder to maintain, with their fast moveset and just overall annoying gameplay, and the Throne Defender, who's slower but deals more damage. It's like Ornstein and Smough, but more shit. They both have a second phase where they upgrade their weapon, which is really annoying. They have a feature where if you kill one of them, they'll start reviving each other back to full health. So it's recommended to chip away at both of their health bars, or else you'll be stuck in a loop. This fight can seem stressful and tedious at points, but I sort of enjoy this boss. It takes skill to maintain two at once. I've always had a big heart for duo bosses. Other than Lud and Zalin, of course. Not a bad boss in my opinion. On to our number 18 spot, we have a rendition of Quelaag. Instead of the fire spider, it's Scorpion, and instead of Quelaag, it's an emo blue version of Quelaag. I think Quelaag is better than this boss, because this is just a ripoff. Nazca has some moves where she jabs her stinger in the ground, which are some of the easiest moves to dodge, and has some crystal magic. Her most notable move is when she goes in the ground and pops back up, but this is easily countered by the tiny sliver of concrete so that she doesn't come from below. This is definitely a downgrade of Quelaag, but this boss is better than most of the bosses in my opinion. Now, I don't know how the fuck the Covetous Demon was into this thing. He must have had a real bad taste. If you don't remember the rant I went on about the Covetous Demon lore, this is the girl that he was trying to hit on. Mytha is a snake-looking lady who looks eerily similar to Medusa. She goes around swinging her weapon while using her head as an actual grenade. Mytha is heavily immune to poison. So immune that she can heal if she's in poison. She can be really aggressive with her magic attacks and can be overwhelming at times. Earlier in the level, there's a windmill which will get rid of the poison flooding her boss room once burned, but I didn't find any recording, sadly. Mytha definitely deserves a 17th spot in my opinion. On to the second Lord boss of this list, we have the Lost Sinner, who inherited the Bed of Chaos' soul. We get here by getting through the Sinner's Rise, where we find the Lost Sinner get corrupted by a Chaos bug, which is a throwback to the Bed of Chaos. Terrible boss. You can fight this boss two ways. One by fighting her in pitch black, which I do not recommend, or you can bring a torch and light the outside of the arena so the boss arena is lit up. Then it's a one-on-one between you and her. This fight can get really annoying with her jumping around if you have a slow weapon. It's really hard to get hits in because she'll just jump around. Even though I'm using a slow weapon, I still really like this boss. It feels sort of like a 1 versus 1 between two actual players. This boss is pretty good. Now on to a really unique boss. There's not one, not two, but 3 in one room. Now the first time I saw this, I got scared as hell. Fighting 2 is already hard enough, but 3 is on a whole nother level. You spawn by dropping on a ledge with one of the sentinels. It's recommended just to fight this one right now, since the other sentinels don't join you until you kill the first sentinel. Once you kill the first sentinel, another one will jump on. It is recommended to take away as much health off of the second sentinel before the other one comes in. And then it's just a duo boss. They'll do basic swings with what looks like a golf club to me, and some plunge attacks that could be scary at points. I really like the idea of trio bosses, other than the Gang Squad. Definitely one of the most memorable fights in the game. Looks familiar? Well, that's because it's freaking Ornstein from Dark Souls 1. Ornstein in Smough is one of the best bosses in the Soulsborne series in my opinion. I usually don't like reskins, but come on, it's Ornstein. We find the old Dragon Slayer in a small cathedral with basically the same moves as Ornstein. It really shows you how easy fighting Ornstein by himself really is. Instead of Ornstein's usual lightning attacks, he uses dark magic, which is a popular choice between these bosses in the game. He does his swings, but is easily countered by strafing. And also, that stupid dragon at the front of the arena. This definitely deserves a high spot out of these bosses, and I'm so glad they did a throwback to one of the best bosses. Alright, now if you have arachnophobia, then you're gonna hate this part of the game, because all of it is just spiders. The Duke's Dear Freya is the third Lord boss of the game, in which Freya inherited Seath the Scaleless' soul. Freya is a giant spider with 2 heads on each end. The arena is filled with spiders, but can be countered with a torch since the spiders won't attack you. This fight is pretty easy. You just have to dodge its fangs and its legs. The spider has a blue beam that can do some pretty heavy damage, but you can just run to the other head to avoid this. The hitboxes can be a little awkward since you can hit the side of its head, which will just deflect your attack. Going through this level was really creepy because I'm scared of large spiders. I'm fine with Freya, but hundreds of large spiders really freak me out. Once you beat this boss, you can look up to see Seath in a bundle of webs, which is pretty cool. And you can also kill the person who made the Duke's Archives in Dark Souls 1, which is pretty cool too. This boss is really neat in my opinion. On to our final Lord boss of the game, we have the Rotten, who inherited Nito's soul. We get here by getting through the Pure Aids, also known as the Black Gulch, and then we find the Rotten playing with statues, but gets a little too mad. This fight is also really easy. This is my go-to for farming bosses since bonfire aesthetics are a feature in this game. The Rotten does some swipes with his machete and some ground slams that are really easy to dodge. One criticism I have is the arena. I don't like the placement of the fire pits, and due to this guy being pretty big, you'll definitely get hit into these. I find this guy to be really funny too. I don't know why, but he just has a comedic effect. It's even more funny when you chop off his limbs and will make him into a walking vegetable too. They will eventually grow back, but this boss is still easy as hell. He also gets the ability to do the most bullshit AoE attack. AoE attacks that are just so sudden really piss me off sometimes. I think this boss definitely deserves to be the best Lord boss. Now I used to hate this boss when I first played this game, but now it's going on me. The fact that she can summon enemies and get blown up by pyromancy really grinded my gears. But now it's a fun fight in my opinion. Alana does some magic attacks such as summoning a fireball and then blowing up. I never liked this move at all. I don't know why, it just annoyed me. Her most notable move is summoning enemies. She can either summon skeletons, pigs, and Velstadt. Normal enemies in a boss is already bad enough, but another boss in a boss fight is on a whole other level. Trying to fight a boss while another boss is throwing magic at you really sucks. But I'm glad it's Velstadt and not anybody else because I like Velstadt. The only hard part about this boss is the summons, but it's balanced because she doesn't spam it too much. Really great fight in my opinion. Making it at our top 10 is the Smelter Demon. We're starting to get into our really good bosses now, and the Smelter Demon is definitely one of them. The Smelter Demon has some of the fairest gameplay a boss can have, and is also pretty tough too. First phase, he swings his sword around, and that's it. And once you hit him around 3 or 4 times depending on your weapon, he fires up and makes it to where if you're close to him, you'll start losing health. And once you get him down to half health, he fires up his sword by stabbing himself, which is pretty cool. His sword is now buffed, and he can now do an AoE. This boss can be frustrating, but even more frustrating that every time you die, you have to go through the Iron Keep, which is one of the worst design levels in the game. I find his arena also really cool. I don't know why, but it's cool to look at. Really good boss, even though it's down in the Iron Keep. The first boss in the Old Iron King DLC, we have, another reskin. Yeah, FromSoft will never learn their lesson. But same with the Giant Lord, I love this boss. People hate on this boss because, yeah, it's lazy, yeah, it's a reskin, but not only does the blue Smelter Demon look badass with the color blue, it's a reskin of a really good boss. But he's not the overall same. He's powered by magic instead of fire and has delayed attacks. And because this is a late game boss, he deals way more damage than the regular Smelter Demon. The reason why he looks like this is because this Smelter Demon was a guard for the Old Iron King, in which to use his magic powers to summon more of the Smelter Demons, which is how the Red Smelter Demon exists. He pretty much does the exact same moves, such as his buffs, but this one definitely deserves to be in the top 10. Now, can we take a moment of appreciation for the opening cutscene? This man literally drops in from a giant bird and gives you a menacing stare while his eyes turn red. So cool. Now, this is definitely one of the best early game bosses in the series because this man has some of the fairest gameplay ever. This man will do some combos with his sword that are relatively easy to dodge if you just strafe, like many other bosses in this game. He'll do an attack where he charges up his sword, which gives you the curse status effect, which by the way got heavily nerfed compared to Dark Souls 1. He also has a really scenic arena with the sunset shining towards us. The arena also contains these giant crossbows that you can shoot, and if aligned right, it will absolutely obliterate its health. But he can also break them when one hit, so it can be quite hard to pull off. Doing this also makes me feel a little cheesy because this boss is too great. Once you kill him, he can also appear as a normal enemy around the map, which is pretty cool. Definitely one of the best bosses out there. Now on to the man who dedicated his life to guard King Vendrick, we have the man Velstadt. This is the guy who was guarding King Vendrick in the Undead Crypt. Since Lysandra gained power, Vendrick was guarded by his most loyal knight Velstadt, which is this guy. This man is honestly really cool. Even though his arena is a bit lackluster and doesn't have much going on, Velstadt managed to get to our number 7. Velstadt has a unique weapon, which acts sort of like a chime. He swings his hammer around and has some questionable hitboxes. For this man's size, this guy hits like a truck. Getting caught in a heavy attack can result in you losing around 70% of your health. Once you get him around half health, he activates his second phase by using dark magic by swinging around his weapon. His defenses and damage are now increased, with also gaining the ability to use magic too. Definitely one of the most badass characters in the Dark Souls series, and deserves to be at number 7. On to one of the best designed bosses in the series, we have the Looking Glass Knight. This boss was one of the bosses that really stood out to me because of its unique design, with its arena design being some of the best, and his armor being pretty cool too, with his motionless face. We get here by getting through Drangleic Castle to find this guy. He swings with his sword and uses the storm to gain lightning attacks, which is awesome. His most unique thing is definitely his shield, which is a mirror attached to his shield. He can do a special ability of summoning an NPC or a real player to help him with this fight. The NPCs are really easy to kill, so it's not too bad. The animation of him summoning another player is also really cool too. My favorite fights are definitely fighting knights, because this type of boss makes it feel like you're fighting someone in equal skill as you. This fight is definitely one of my favorites in the series by far. We are finally at our top 5, and at our top 5 we have one of the best dragon fights in the series, Sin. I don't know what it is with this dragon, but this fight is stressful and fun as fuck. This guy flies around while being aggressive as hell by doing a dash attack and shooting fireballs at you. Sin is a dragon that is made out of stone that shoots poison fireballs that linger for a bit. It can be hard to find a spot to attack him where there's no poison around. Sin also does a lot of damage. That also adds to the stressful part of this fight. I find this man so fun because this guy actually puts up a fight. Even though I bet him on the first try, it took me around 7 minutes to kill him. Absolute masterpiece of a dragon fight in my opinion. And I think it's better than Kalameet from Dark Souls 1. What a finale to end off the Sunken King DLC. Now onto a secret boss in the game, we have the Dark Lurker. This man, or woman, or whatever the hell it is, deserves a spot for a sort of mysterious atmosphere. Literally no one knows where it came from, and the lore behind this boss is very minimal. After joining the Pilgrims of the Dark Covenant, we can go through these dungeons called the Dark Chasm of Old. After doing all 3 of the dungeons, we are met with the Dark Lurker. The Dark Lurker is based off of dark magic, and has a wide range of attacks. It can do a sword attack, a laser attack, and a ball of energy that can pack a punch. This boss is pretty alright with the first part, but out of nowhere, it gains a second phase where it splits into 2. So now it's double the trouble. You sort of have to strategize when to hit one because both of them could combo you with the double AoE. This boss also has one of the best looks in the game, with its angel wings and 4 arms. This boss is definitely crowned as the best base game boss and one of the greatest bosses out there. Coming in hot and ready, we have Sir Alon. Now these last 3 bosses all came close to being the best boss in the game. All of them were so great and unique that it was tough deciding who was the best. Sir Alon is the first samurai boss in the series, and it did not fail to disappoint. He wields a katana doing fast dash attacks that are pretty tough to go against. Also not to mention he has one of the sickest boss arenas in the series. Just walking in while he's meditating is just so cool too. He has a unique attack where he charges up his sword, and if you get caught in it, he'll get buffed, which is a little scary. You might ask why this boss is not as good as the others? Well, number 1, he lacks a moveset. This man only has like 4 moves up his sleeves, and is basically swing, dash, And number 2 is the annoying ass run back, which is the memory of the old Iron King. F those fire-breathing lizards. But don't get me wrong, this boss is still a masterpiece. He can also screw you over if you have a slow weapon, since Sir Alon is one of the fastest bosses in the game. Sir Alon is one of many people's favorites in the game, and there's no doubt why. Absolute masterpiece of a boss. Now onto one of the most intimidating bosses, we have Fume Knight. After getting to the bottom of Broom Tower, we find this big boy in a pit of ash. Now the reason this guy intimidates me is because number 1, he's probably the hardest boss in the game. And number 2, this guy just looks scary. By looking at him, you can notice that he has 2 swords. One sword is a tiny, fast sword, and the other one is a slow, heavy-hitting sword that can have some pretty terrible hitboxes. So trying to fight a slow and a fast weapon is pretty tough as it is. Trying to dodge his fast swings while he does a slow attack at the end can really catch you off guard. Once you get him to about half health, his second phase starts. He throws away his fast sword and busts his giant sword. So now you have to worry about the big sword being swung fast while also dealing more damage than its first phase. He unlocks the ability to do a weird AoE where fireballs circle around him, and has the ability to swing his sword in slow motion? I don't really know what this is, but it can do a whole lot of damage. And that's basically Fume Knight. I put him higher than Sir Alon because he's tougher and has a wide range of moves. This boss can be frustrating, but still, this boss is a masterpiece and will always be one of my favorite fights. And now the final boss. Wait. Alright, now when I was editing this video, I noticed that my footage of the Burnt Ivory King got corrupted, and for some reason you can't use a bonfire aesthetic to respawn this boss, so I used a footage of another person. This is just a heads up for the next part. We are finally here with the best boss in the game, the Burnt Ivory King. I can't even explain how epic this boss is. From fighting enemies and the Burnt Ivory King joining in, this boss definitely takes the cake out of the three since it has a short run back, an epic arena, an epic fight between knights, and the big man himself. To start this fight, you have to free 4 different knights from cells, and the knights will join you in your fight. You then drop down into the Old Chaos where you fight a battle against the knights. It just feels so epic fighting with other knights on your side. It makes you feel like the hero. And once you freeze all of the portals, the big man himself joins in with an epic entrance. Now it's just you and your fellow knight against the Ivory King. If you release the 4th knight in your playthrough, you will have a knight that will stay long enough for the king to spawn in. The king will easily melt the knight's health off, but he can still be a pretty good help. The king will do some swipe attacks, dash attacks, and a delayed 360 attack that I always found so cool. Once you get him down to around half health, his second phase starts where he makes his weapon into what looks like a lightsaber. His weapon now has a wider hitbox and gains the ability to do an AoE where he summons ice around him, which is pretty cool. This is definitely the most cinematic fight in the game. Just fighting a war with the knights and fighting the Burnt Ivory King himself always felt so cool. This boss definitely deserves to be the best fight in Dark Souls 2, and I think that wraps it up for this video. And that's the tier list. I hope everybody enjoyed this video because this one took an extra long time. After how well my last video did, I'll be sure to make a Dark Souls 3 one in the future. I'm working on fixing my schedule, so I'll try to upload more frequently. But until then, make sure to smash that like and subscribe button and comment button. And until then, I'll see you in the next one.